Ukraine waited for the Russian commanders to celebrate a victory, and then blew up the Russian air base. While officers partied inside the hangars, silent drones crept closer in the dark. Within minutes, for different air bases at once turned into scenes of chaos. 41 strategic aircraft were destroyed. We're talking about a coordinated strike that started from inside Russia itself. The drones were already there, hidden for weeks, just waiting for the perfect moment. This is the story of how Ukraine pulled off the boldest, most impossible operation of 2025 and completely changed the rules of the game. It was June 1st, 2025, just another seemingly normal night at the Russian air bases of Engels, Dyagilevo, Olynya, and Belia. Crews were resting, some officers probably celebrating another routine day. Security was active, but nothing pointed to what was about to go down. Suddenly, the night sky lit up with explosions tearing through the silence. Hangars went up in flames, strategic bombers turned into burning wreckage, and what looked like just another quiet night became the biggest coordinated strike against Russian military aviation since the war started in 2022. The wildest part, the drones didn't come from Ukrainian territory. They'd been hidden for weeks inside Russia itself, waiting for the perfect time to strike. This video will show how Ukrainian intelligence planned and pulled off one of the most sophisticated ops in modern military history, proving that even with limited resources, strategy and precision can totally flip the game. You're about to see exactly how this was possible, which targets were destroyed, which high-ranking commander lost his life in these operations, and what all this means for the near future of a war that's already dragged on for over 3 years. June 2025 will go down in military history as the month of the Spiderweb Operation, or as the Ukrainians called it, Operatsija Pavutina. This wasn't some improvised stunt or a desperate move. It was the result of months of meticulous planning, silent infiltration, and perfect timing. The bases hit were way deep inside Russian territory. Olynya sits on the Kola Peninsula, near Murmansk, up in the far north. Belia is in the Irkutsk region, a mind-blowing 5,500 kilometers east of Ukraine, basically Siberia. Engels and Dyagilevo are in Saratov and Ryazan, hundreds of kilometers from the Ukrainian border. The genius of the operation wasn't just in the distances they covered, but in how the drones even got there. According to sources from Ukraine's security service interviewed by ABC News and CNN, the drones were smuggled into Russia weeks before the attack. They were hidden inside structures that looked like regular mobile homes, with retractable roofs that opened up at the exact moment of launch. Ukrainian intelligence agents, probably with help from local Russian collaborators, placed these launch systems strategically near the air bases. While Russian air defenses were tuned to detect threats coming from Ukrainian airspace, these drones were launched from inside Russian territory itself, completely bypassing early warning systems. On the night of June 1st, in a perfectly synchronized strike, the drones took off at the same time from multiple spots. The result was devastating. According to Ukrainian officials, 41 Russian aircraft were hit, including two 95 and two 160 strategic bombers, surveillance planes, and refueling aircraft. Some were completely destroyed, others badly damaged. People on the ground and videos later released by Ukraine's security service showed the chaos. Planes on fire, secondary explosions from fuel and store munitions, crews running in panic, trying to contain the blazes. The Atlantic Council called the strike one of the most audacious operations in modern military history, while Washington Post analysts said it was a turning point that proved no place in Russia is truly safe. There's an old military saying, victory belongs to the one who picks the right moment to strike. And that's exactly what Ukraine did. But how did they pick this specific moment? Military operations depend on routines. Air bases have peak and low activity hours, guard shift changes, moments when vigilance naturally drops. Ukrainian intelligence spent months studying those routines, identifying patterns, mapping out weak spots. The line, "They waited for the commanders to celebrate," isn't just a catchy phrase. In high-pressure military environments, celebrations, inspections, or special events usually create windows of vulnerability. The staff is focused on other stuff, security protocols can be temporarily loosened, and collective attention drifts away from constant surveillance. On top of that, there's another critical factor: striking in the dark of night. Drones are naturally harder to spot in the dark, and air defense systems that rely on visual or thermal detection lose a lot of their effectiveness. By combining the element of surprise of launching from inside with a nighttime strike, the Ukrainians maximized their odds of success. The planning also included deception. While Russian forces were focused on possible strikes from the western border or the Black Sea, the real threat was silently sleeping in warehouses and harmless-looking structures just a few kilometers away from their own bases. That's the difference between a regular attack and a high-level strategic op. It's not enough to have the weapon. You need to know exactly when and how to use it to hit hardest with the lowest risk. To understand why this operation matters so much, we need to look at what exactly got destroyed. Strategic bombers like the Tu-95 and Tu-160 aren't just regular planes. They're massive aircraft capable of carrying long-range weapons, including high destructive power devices. A single Tu-160, nicknamed White Swan, can carry up to 12 long-range cruise missiles. These planes are a key part of Russia's ability to project power over long distances. Every bomber destroyed means dozens of attacks that won't happen. It means less pressure on Ukrainian cities, fewer strikes on energy infrastructure, less terror from the skies. And it's not just the planes. The hangars hit also held weapon stockpiles, spare parts, aviation fuel, and maintenance gear. Air bases are complex logistics hubs. When you blow up a hangar, you're not just damaging a building, you're disrupting a whole chain of operations. Planes need to be relocated, technical crews reassigned, new security systems put in place. The cost in time, resources, and morale is huge. And then there's the psychological blow. Pilots and crews who once felt safe in bases deep inside Russia now know they can be reached. Commanders have to split focus and resources between offensive ops and defending their own facilities. The feeling of invulnerability is gone. Military analysts estimate each strategic bomber costs between $100 and $200 million and takes years to build. Russia can't just replace these losses quickly. Every destroyed aircraft is a permanent hole in Russia's military capabilities for months, maybe years. If June was the month of strikes on air bases, July brought another major strategic win for the Ukrainians, the elimination of one of Russia's highest-ranking military commanders since the start of the war. On July 2, 2025, Major General Mikhail Gudkov, 42, deputy commander of the Russian Navy, was killed in a Ukrainian strike in the Kursk region. The confirmation came from Russia's own defense ministry, which almost never admits the deaths of top officers publicly, showing how important this was and how impossible it was to hide. Gudkov wasn't just any officer. As second in command of the entire Russian Navy, he had access to sensitive strategic info, was part of top-level decision-making, and coordinated naval ops on multiple fronts. At the time of his death, he was personally leading a brigade fighting Ukrainian forces in Kursk, a Russian region where Ukraine had launched a surprise land offensive and captured territory. The Washington Post, CBS News, and other big outlets reported that Gudkov was killed when Ukrainian forces hit the HQ of the 155th Naval Infantry Brigade. The strike killed at least 6 officers, but Gudkov's death was the biggest blow. Ukrainian sources, while not officially confirming the strike, made it pretty clear between the lines that they knew exactly where he was and when to hit. According to some analysts who keep detailed records of Russian military losses, Gudkov is one of 12 Russian generals whose deaths have been confirmed by Russian sources since the 2022 invasion began. That number might sound small, but generals usually aren't at the front lines. The fact that so many have been taken out shows both how effective Ukrainian intelligence is and how desperate Russia is to send top brass to the field to deal with command and control problems. The death of an officer at that level sends a crystal clear message: nobody's out of reach. If the Navy's deputy commander can be located and taken out, any Russian commander has to constantly look over their shoulder. It breeds paranoia, complicates planning, forces constant relocations, and at the end of the day, erodes the effectiveness of Russia's military command. The spiderweb operation and Gudkov's elimination were the most spectacular events, but they're part of a much wider, systematic campaign. On July 5th, just days after Gudkov's death, Ukrainian forces hit the Borisoglebsk air base in the Voronezh region. According to reports from Agência Brazil and other outlets, the strike destroyed stockpiles of guided munitions and damaged training aircraft. Hangars were consumed by massive flames, leaving the base partially out of action for weeks. In early August, Ukraine stepped up strikes against Shahid drone depots, the Iranian-made UAVs Russia relies on heavily to pound Ukrainian infrastructure. One strike in Primorsko-Akhtarsk, southern Russia, hit a major storage site for these drones. At the same time, facilities tied to the production of military components in the city of Penza were also attacked. On August 4th, occupied Crimea got hit again. According to Euronews, the Sakei airfield, a strategic site Russia uses as a forward base for Black Sea operations, was struck. At least 5 Russian fighter jets were damaged or destroyed in the attack. This wasn't the first time Sakei was targeted. The base had already been hammered back in 2022, but the repeat strike shows that even reinforced facilities remain vulnerable. On June 6th, in an action described as a preventive strike by Ukraine's general staff, drones once again hit Engels and Dyagilevo. According to the Kyiv Independent, fuel tanks went up in flames, with fires visible from kilometers away. The stated goal was to neutralize aircraft that were about to be used in a massive drone and missile strike on Ukrainian cities just hours later. The pattern is clear. Ukraine is systematically dismantling Russia's ability to project air power, destroying not just the aircraft, but the whole logistical chain that supports them, from fuel depots to component factories, from maintenance hangars to weapons stockpiles. But how exactly are these operations carried out? What kind of tech allows Ukraine to strike targets thousands of kilometers away with such precision? The answer lies in a combo of 3 key elements: advanced drones, high-quality intelligence, and meticulous planning. The drones being used aren't toy gadgets or amateur improvisations. These are UAVs specifically designed or modified for long-range missions. Some are kamikaze drones loaded with explosives and programmed to crash into their targets. Others are surveillance drones that map defenses and spot weak points before the main strike. Many of these drones are built right in Ukraine, in factories that either popped up or expanded since the war began. Ukrainian tech companies, many of them startups that once made commercial drones, shifted their production lines to military use. The result is a homegrown industry cranking out thousands of drones a month, each one costing just a fraction of what a traditional guided weapon would. But the drone is just a tool. The real weapon is information. To hit an air base with precision, you need to know exactly where the hangars are, where the fuel depots sit, where the planes are parked, where the air defenses are, and what their blind spots look like. That intel comes from multiple sources: commercial satellites providing high-res images, surveillance drones scouting ahead, intercepts of enemy comms, human agents on the ground confirming details, and in some cases, collaborators inside Russia itself feeding real-time data. Once the target's identified and mapped, the mission planning kicks in. Flight paths are calculated to avoid areas with heavy air defenses. Timing is coordinated so multiple drones hit multiple targets at once, overwhelming defenses. Decoy drones might be used to draw fire one way while the main strike comes from another. It's a complex orchestra where every part has to play in perfect sync. And the fact that Ukraine has consistently pulled off these ops shows a level of sophistication that many analysts never expected back when the war first started. When we talk about 41 planes destroyed or a general eliminated, it's easy to focus just on the numbers. But the real impact of these strikes goes way beyond the immediate material losses. First, there's the direct operational effect. Every bomber destroyed means less capacity to hit Ukraine's critical infrastructure. Fewer strikes mean less damage to power plants, fewer energy blackouts during winter, less terror raining down on civilians. In practical terms, these operations are saving Ukrainian lives by cutting Russia's ability to bomb cities. Second, there's the logistical and economic impact. Russia now has to divert significant resources to protect sites it once considered safe. Air defense systems have to be pulled away from a front to guard interior bases. Security teams need to expand. Operating procedures have to be rewritten. All of that eats up time, money, and attention that could have gone to offensive operations. Third, and maybe most important, there's the psychological and political impact. For the Russian public, the official narrative has always been that the special operation is going according to plan, that Russian territory is safe, that the armed forces are untouchable. But when air bases go up in flames in Siberia, when the Navy's deputy commander is taken out, when drones appear over Moscow, that narrative starts to crack. This sparks internal pressure. Soldiers' families grow anxious. Political analysts begin questioning how the war's being run. Military commanders have to explain away security failures. In an autocratic system where projecting strength is everything, visible vulnerability can have serious political consequences. For Ukraine, on the other hand, these wins are vital for morale. After months of enduring constant attacks, being able to take the fight deep into enemy territory shows resilience, creativity, and adaptability. It proves to Ukrainian soldiers that they're not just defending, but also counterattacking effectively. It shows international allies that the support they're providing is being used smartly and effectively. Actions bring reactions, and the cycle of strike and counterstrike has only been intensifying over the past few months. In response to Ukraine's attacks, Russian forces have dramatically stepped up their own airstrikes. At the end of September 2025, Russian strikes killed at least 4 civilians in Kyiv, including a 12-year-old girl, according to reports from Al Jazeera and NPR. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky called the strikes pure terrorism and urged the international community to respond with tougher sanctions and more advanced air defense systems. The spiral of violence is troubling. Each successful Ukrainian strike tends to trigger disproportionate retaliation against civilian targets. That's one of the grim realities of modern conflicts, where the line between military and civilian targets often gets blurred, especially when one side has limited ability to strike deeply protected enemy installations. Russia has also heavily reinforced defenses at its remaining air bases. Additional air defense systems have been deployed, security protocols tightened, and reports suggest some strategic aircraft have been relocated to bases even further from Ukraine's reach, though that brings its own logistical headaches. There's also a major political angle. Russia has been pushing diplomatically to pressure Ukraine's allies to restrict the supply of tech that could be used in long-range strikes. At the same time, it tries to spin every Ukrainian strike on Russian territory as justification for its own actions, painting itself as the victim of aggression in international forums. The international community is split. Some countries see Ukraine's strikes as legitimate self-defense and a rightful way to hit enemy military assets. Others voice concern about escalation and the risk of the conflict spilling beyond current borders. When this war first kicked off in February 2022, very few analysts believed Ukraine could sustain an effective long-range strike campaign inside Russian territory. The gap in resources, territory, and military power looked insurmountable. 3.5 years later, reality has proved the skeptics wrong. Ukraine hasn't just survived, it's developed sophisticated offensive capabilities reaching targets thousands of kilometers away. Careful planning, creative use of available tech, top-notch intelligence, and unshakable determination have made up for shortfalls in traditional resources. But looking at the latest data, it's clear this conflict is still far from over. So make sure to subscribe to the channel and don't miss any updates straight from the front.